Who have we here? Even if we did manage to dig up the secrets of his past, I doubt our meddling could ever amount to much.
Conjure your past, how once you were.
Hey guys, Thingfishy here. So I wanted to make a full guide for the weapon that I used the most on my first playthrough of Shadow of the Erdtree. My first bully everything run used the only big bonk in the base game with bleed on it. So when I found an arcane scaling bonk in the DLC, I knew exactly what I needed to do. So for this build I used my character from Bully Everything 3, but any build around level 125 will work. Head to Renala to respec for the DLC. Now for this run I went with 40 Vigour and no defensive charms to force myself to play a little better and go for some no-hit fights. But if you're not confident with the DLC bosses, you want to go for a little less arcane, 60 Vigour, and make sure you have Erdtree's Favour +2 and the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman equipped throughout. You'll still be doing silly damage, don't worry. To get started, I did the first part of my DLC setup guide, staying within the first two areas and not entering the Shadow Keep. This gets us to Shadow Tree level 9 in about 15 minutes. And the first bit of gear we need is literally right in front of the starting area, at the top of the Scorched Ruins. The Blade of Mercy is my favourite talisman in Elden Ring, as it basically gives you 20% extra damage at pretty much all times on builds like this. Now time for our weapon. The Blood Fiend's arm is a guaranteed drop from a Blood Fiend in Prospect Town. And on the vast majority of builds, you really don't need to be too delicate in getting it. Just run in, whack this guy, and grab our bonk for the run. Now back to the base game, and into the Night Sacred Ground to grab the Black Wet Blade. Now when equipped with the bleed affinity, the arm does a shocking amount of bleed per hit. It was actually a little higher on original patch, but this has been nerfed slightly. All but one of the DLC bosses are bleedable. So with high arcane scaling, as you'll see, this thing does utterly silly damage. Back to the DLC, to the Morth Ruins. We're first heading northeast, through the river, past the fragment we got on the setup, all the way through the Poison Swamp area, to the Rowell base. East of the Grace, you'll find the map fragment. Then into the Templetown Ruins for a Scooby-Doo tree fragment. Then up to the top for the two-handed talisman for all of the non-parryable bosses. Now back to the castle front Grace and drop down the cliffs to the southeast of it. By exploring down here, you'll find the Cerulean coast. After the first Grace, head south to grab the map, then further on to the tip for another fragment. For the first boss of the run, I wanted to do the easiest one first, so I headed down into the fissure for the putrescent... fuck. Having found out what breaking the Great Rune actually does, I headed back to the Morth Ruins, down the crater, and up the ladder to Bonnie Village. Just past the second bridge is the point of no return for NPC questlines, so if you don't want to lock yourself out of dialogue, don't do this just yet. So we're once again heading into the back of the Shadow Keep, and making our way to Commander Gaius. Now, in my last video, you might have noticed a curious lack of any Fire Knights. And that's because with a light weapon, these guys will kick the living shit out of you. But on strength builds, you can pretend it's your first Souls game and just spam R1s at them until they die. This works with every one of them. Because you're not scared of them, we can grab this rather scarily placed fragment early on. Commander Gaius is worth killing early on any run, because of the 5 fragments he guards. This weapon, when combined with Stone Barb and Cragblade, does 70 poise damage, and that's enough to break every posture bar in the DLC with 2 charges. Gaius, however, you can stagger with just a charge and an R1. So if you don't want to be delicate with this fight, you can just brute force it. In the phase transition, you have enough time to heal and rebuff with Cragblade. And now we can do Putrescent Knight. This is the only boss in the DLC that is immune to bleed. So you either want to respec to Holy or Occult for this. I couldn't be bothered to go get all the Holy buffs, and Occult seemed to do the trick. Like Gaius, Putrescent would stagger in a charge and an R1, but there's enough space to get charges off in this fight pretty easily. After this fight, I did Theolier's questline, so the ladder fight isn't quite as horrendous as it usually is. I'll stick a link in the description to my full walkthrough of this questline, as it's going to be tedious for all of us if I show the full thing in every guide. After you're done, to Castle Ensis. And here again we see the effectiveness of Big Bonks versus the elite DLC enemies. Before R'hllana, I headed back to the base game, to Blood Gideon, to grab the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman. And apart from that quick 1-2, this was a pretty good fight. Strats wise, exactly the same as Malenia. Take the riposte and get in a chargey while she stands up, then 2 more through the phase change. Now into the Shadow Keep. For Hippo, something I learned from watching the speedrunners is running into this corner at the start of the fight means you don't have to dodge the first attack. And due to Hippo's low posture, this fight is pretty easy. Speak to Leda and Hornsent after the fight, and reload the area till Leda gives you the Hornsent dialogue. After this, you'll find the summon signs by the boats in the Shadow Keep. Take the red one to help Ledder and kill Hornsent. Now, while I was fully intending to do this run without armor as usual, while I was bullying this Fire Knight, I got the armor drop and couldn't resist. Very close by, I headed into the secret area to start making my way down to the Abyssal Woods. I didn't bother with the scad frag at the bottom of the waterfall on this run, as it's quite out of the way, but I did kill the hippos on the way to the Darklight Catacombs. Another trick that I picked up from watching speedruns is a cool little skip you can do here, by jumping off this balcony onto this ledge. This skips about half of the dungeon, and since recording this, another one has been found that effectively skips the second half, so I'll show that in the next one. Now for Jury, and it's backstabs once again. You can actually get him in a loop if you're quick enough. But like I said in the last run, this fight isn't going to bother you much on leveled runs. In the Abyssal Woods, head to the church for the map fragment and the Scadoos. Then head through the woods to Mitchriz Mats. For Midra, 2 charges on the opener for a stun, riposte, then another chargy. Switch from 2-handing, then 2 parries, and it's all over. Now back to the Shaded Castle for another secret area. I wanted to try the Flame Art infusion for the avatar because of his massive weakness to it, and it's pretty good. If I hadn't messed up the explosion dodge, this would have been a very clean fight. Now back to the Shadow Keep and speak to Arnsbark in a room near the storehouse first floor, Grace. He'll be here if you've spoken to him outside the entrance to Belleran. After speaking to him, up to the 4th floor to bully the Fire Knight, then down the staircase into this room for the item, then drop down back to him. With Arnsbark all set to meet us later, we head left from the Grace, down the elevator and out of the castle towards the ancient ruins. Once again, you can skip down to the hippo by doing this jump. It's more consistent if you walk right to the edge before jumping. Try not to aggro a blood fiend during the hippo fight. It's easier without this. Then through the rest of the area for another 3 fragments. You can check out my setup guide for the full route if you get lost. And there's not much to say about Romina. With the lowest posture of any Remembrance boss in the DLC, she can be absolutely bullied with a build like this. She does move around a lot though, so it's not that simple in practice. This fight isn't going to give you much trouble though. Back to the Shadow Keep to bully one more Fire Knight before Mesmer. As for Mesmer, I'm just going to let this one play. And time for the final area. And a boss so bad it makes me miss Gideon. Drop back to Thiolier to get his final dialogue before heading in so he turns up to help you. For the invasion, you want to spam R1s on Dryleaf and then gank Ledder with the boys. Now for a really easy boss. Yeah, I still haven't learned the Divine Lion fight yet, so I thought it would be fun to see what a late game build does to him. And the results are pretty good. Obviously, if you know this fight, feel free to do it much earlier. Back to Inir Ilum for the final boss. I spent a lot of time learning the Radahn fight at RL1 prior to filming this, and the process of doing that has made me realise why I'm not warming to this boss as much as the other fights in the DLC. If you've watched this channel for a while, and in particular the bully builds, you know how I like to play. Far too aggressively with a big old bonky stick, getting stuck in with parries and charged attacks, building posture damage between ripostes for a Sekiro style stand in front of the boss and win type combat. You can do this with every parryable boss in the game, except Radahn. For a no parry fight with Radahn, I will punish 5 of his moves. There's 5 that can be consistently punished with a weapon of this size. On a parry fight though, there's only 3, and only one of them happens in phase 1. The result of this is a boss that I don't really like fighting without parries because of how RNG some of the zapping in phase 2 can feel. But one that I also don't really enjoy parrying, because all you can do is stand there reactively and passively parrying for a few minutes. Don't get me wrong, it is possible to punish between parries, but if he does the triple slash, you're dead. Happily though, these are just the ramblings of someone trying to be flashy. If you just want to kill this guy, respec to 60 vigor, stick on the great shield and favour talismans, walk in there and spam charges whilst face tanking, and you'll be fine. And once again we finish on a boss who I have absolutely no complaints about. If you want to see a shit ton more build guides like this in Shadow of the Erdtree, subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon.